and you're feeling all alone. Only you to hold your own. No one there to help you. Only there to hold you down. So stop. Don't beat up yourself. 'Cause it's everyone else. So don't look down. Look up around. 'Cause you are better. I can see that when the fire gets started, it takes a lot of tears to wash away. When they come and make you feel downhearted, don't hide away. And now it's feeling like the longest day. It's getting harder to find the will to stay. You gotta find the strength inside of you, so don't hide away. I can see that when the fire gets started, it takes a lot of tears to wash away. When they come and
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and children of all ages, welcome to season 2 of Bridging the Gap. I'm your host, John Morris, and I hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world today. Now, if you've never seen this show before, this is really, really different. As we know around the world, teenagers and parents seem to have this disconnect. They just don't seem to understand each other, and they really, really just struggle more often than not. This show is designed specifically to help parents and teenagers to sit down together and actually be able to talk about some of those things that they're struggling with on a day-to-day basis. And it's also, to create that opportunity, because sometimes creating that space can be really, really difficult. But this, folks, would not be possible, of course, without a co-host, because it's tremendous amount of fun when you got a co-host and someone to bounce off of. Plus, it means you don't need to listen to me for an hour. And therefore, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome my brand new co-host to season 2, the awesome JoJo, who is a mother herself, knows firsthand the battles that many parents have faced. So, Jo, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm doing wonderful. I'm so excited. We've been talking about this for some time now, and so it's finally here.
It is finally here indeed. I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to be a tremendous amount of fun. I think there's the topics are endless. So folks, obviously when you're watching this, do write in, do give your comments and all that kind of stuff, because at the end of the day you will think of topics and stuff that Jo and I haven't thought of, and we want to be of the best service that we possibly can be. So absolutely. Jo, what's on your mind? What do you want to lead in with? I normally lead these shows, so you go ahead with topic number 1 and let's see where we end up.
Okay, well, let's see. I think topic number 1, especially in today's world, needs to be children dealing with anxiety and how us as parents need to approach that with helping them get through that anxiety. Definitely.
I think that's a really good one, to talk about, because anxiety is something that I have seen personally. It is something that I've seen with teenagers all over the world. And the crazy thing is, literally an hour ago, before we jumped upon this, I was in a meeting with a friend of mine having this exact same conversation. Jo, would you say anxiety is probably one of the most common mental health issues that teenagers are facing nowadays?
I do. And I know I can say positively, everybody deals with anxiety at one point in time in their life. And how the people who love them and surround them help them deal with it, that makes a world of difference.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think the thing, because we also want to give you guys and girls, tips and areas that a lot of people will not talk about. And, so we don't really, miss the mark. Your first thing you need to know is you're not born with anxiety. Okay. Anxiety is something we develop. And it's usually because of a fear of the past or a fear of the future, fear of what could be or fear of what has been. And what tends to happen is it starts out as a small thing. So people will experience a situation in their life, whether it be socially, whether or not it be economically, whatever it is, and they get terrified, and that really spooks them. And then the next time it develops a little bit more, and then before they know it, they actually become paralyzed by this. So anxiety is not going to be found as an answer by taking pills. The only place to find the answer is actually in your mind, because that's where the root of it begins. And I don't know about you, Jo, but I find with people, whenever I talk to them and we talk about anxiety or any one of the mental health issues, with the exception of depression, you know, a lot of the time they've gone to doctors who have prescribed them medication and it just numbs them inside, but it never deals with the actual issue, which I always find absolutely amazing.
You're exactly right. And me being that happening to myself at one point in time,
Right.
and it was actually when I was a teenager. And the medicine, I literally felt like a little walking zombie just going around. And it, like you said, it numbs what's truly going on inside your mind. And that's not necessarily the answer. Very rarely is that actually the answer with dealing with that problem.
See, for me, you know, when you get to that stage of taking pills and you've got to be pilled up, it's actually almost as a last resort. And the fastest way, believe it or not, folks, to deal with your anxiety is to start taking charge of it, start taking control of it, realize if it starts in the mind, it has to be treated in the mind. You know, my friend, her daughter is, you know, basically being pilled up at the moment and being made to be numb more than anything else. That ain't solving the issue. That's actually stopping you from doing what your brain is actually designed to do. Your brain is healthy. But the trouble is no one takes the time to actually learn how this body works. When you realize that, you know, how it works is really simple, it actually breaks things down a lot. So the first thing I would say with anyone dealing with anxiety is you got to mind your mind. You got to be careful of what you listen to, who you surround yourself with, what you're intaking, as in what you're drinking, what you're eating, what you're watching, listening to, reading, and also be aware of what you're thinking as well. And before you know it, you know, and I can speak to this as Joe can, you know, your mind will heal itself. But it's really important that you do take steps, because otherwise it can lead on to other things like bipolar, schizophrenia, PTSD, BPD, all of that kind of stuff. It only gets worse if you don't deal with it. So it's really important. Joe, have you anything to add to that?
You just blew my mind, because I wasn't aware that it would lead, or it could lead to like schizophrenia and stuff like that. And that's mind blowing in itself. So it just shows how powerful our mind is, for one, and how we can control that. It takes a lot of work in the front end, but it definitely makes your life a lot smoother and your day-to-day life go better if you take that initiative and that step to get control of it early rather than later. Definitely.
Absolutely.
And we have to explain that to our children, because they're not taught that in school. And most of their learning comes from school and us parents. And so we have to take it on as parents to properly approach that. Don't do it in a nagging way, do it in a loving way, and lead by example.
Very much so. And you know, you said a mouthful there. You know, the school system, it used to be that people would go to school to gain an overview education so as you could go out into the workplace and gain a job. Now they're still trying to teach that mentality and that model. Well, you know, again, all of these issues that teenagers and kids are facing right now, I think a lot of time it's actually missing really what needs to be taught within with, you know, obviously with kids and teenagers. And it's okay to question these things. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time, for sure, regarding the school system. But it's true. So to follow what Joe was just saying, just to give you guys an idea, the way that, you know, your mental health works, very, very foundationally and simply, is if you imagine it almost like the palm of my hand, it starts out flat. It starts out, you know, working fine and everything. Then you maybe have a bad day as a child where you get scared. And it creates maybe a tiny microcosm, kind of just little split, you know, you just a little bit afraid. Maybe it's a spider, or you're afraid of, you know, whatever it might be. And then what happens is that happens again and again and again. And that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So eventually, and I can speak from personal experience, because my mother used to scream the house down when she saw spiders, which naturally projected fear onto me, because as a child, you're learning all these things. So the weird thing is, and it works exactly the same with the more severe mental health issues. So you have a little bit of anxiety, which then breaks apart if it's not dealt with properly. This is what's happening to your personality. It breaks apart a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then eventually it can lead to borderline personality disorders. And if you're refusing to take action and actually do something about it, that anger, that anxiety continues to build and mold and manifest like the snowball rolling downhill. It then can lead into borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, because you are literally stressing your brain out so much, which then can lead into schizophrenia and to schizophrenia, and then it can lead into other things as well. So it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So do you see that by putting your head in the sand, folks, it doesn't help. It really doesn't. It's better actually to kind of confront it straight on, because it can't hurt you. All it is a thought. That's all it is. People suffer their memory or their imagination, and I get that, but at the same point, it's like it can't physically hurt you. So sometimes it's better to observe those thoughts. So that was a little side thought there, just for this in my mind.
Love it. But it's so true, so true. So yes.
Very much so. Joe, one of the things obviously that follows on from what we're talking about here, and this is something that you and I talked about, a couple of weeks ago, is kind of the feeling of being alone. A lot of people now, particularly teenagers, seem to really struggle with feeling alone, and it can be very, very lonely, obviously, if you are battling anxiety or a mental health issue or even a physical health issue. What are your thoughts regarding, the teenagers, and even, in fact, let's branch it out, people in general feeling alone in our day and age?
Wow, there's so many directions to go with that one. That's a big one. And you're right, we did talk about the other day on that topic, because it's not just teenagers that feel that way. It's parents and everything, especially with everything going on in the world today. It just amplifies that. So a lot of times kids are relying on, we'll say, social media to get that loneliness void filled. And when someone doesn't like or something that they post, then it scars them emotionally, for one. And then they go to school and say that, there's clicks here, clicks there, and you don't necessarily fit in it. It just automatically causes all these questions in their mind, and it can really lead to something that's a very major problem. And so we need to stress to our children, it's okay, that you're really not alone, that people love you, but two, it's okay to not fit in with everybody, because it's good to be unique. You don't want to be the same as everybody. And that's something that you really have to stress to your children, to be comfortable in their own skin.
I think that's really important to be able to say that, because again, you see it more and more now in the school system, that people's or children and teenagers' unique gifts, because they don't fit into the mold of what society says is, good or bad or whatever. It's often squashed a lot of the time. And you kind of think, guys, actually it should be something that's celebrated, because those unique gifts often lead into your very purpose for being. You find that as a child that you enjoy writing or drawing or painting or whatever it might be. And you find actually that that's the very thing later on in life that you were put here for. I think to add to what Joe was saying, one of the things I noticed that, I suppose from a spiritual aspect is, that oftentimes people have forgotten who they are. They just believe themselves to be a human being here. I've shown up. Here I am in this form, and you're expected to know everything. And the way that I kind of look at it is, if everything's divine and everything, is you've got an amazing eternal substance to you that leads you and guides you and all that great stuff that makes you who you are. It's then almost impossible in some ways to feel lonely, because you've got that inner knowledge inside you. But for a teenager that's going through that, you may have all the spiritual knowledge that you want, but when you are trying to fit into a group of people, it can be really, really difficult. So one of the things I would say is, look around for people who share the same kind of enjoyments that you do, because they are out there. We are social beings, and you can see it in school all the time. You've got the heavy rockers, you've got people from different ethnicities that hang together. You've got, the literary group people, you got the nerds, you got the dorks, you got, whatever else is out there, that's completely politically incorrect in 2022. Bear with me, folks, because, I'm bringing it from, a while back. But that's the reality. You've always got these people and they always exist. It's just a case sometimes of finding them and taking that, approach to, to build things up. Some little thoughts.
Absolutely. And you're not meant to fit in with everybody.
No.
There's not enough time in the day to spend with everybody. And my favorite thing to say is you are the top 5 people that you surround yourself with. And if you teach your children that early, it will just play a major role in their lives and the direction that they go with their friends. And it takes a lot of stress off of you as a parent too. I'm not gonna lie.
But it's so true though, because how many times do you want, obviously everybody wants the best for the children, but there are some times that you look around, and when I was a youth minister, I would look around at some of the kids and some of the company that they were keeping, and I'm like, ooh. And you can almost project. It is actually possible, folks, to tell the future, because you can project what somebody is going to do if they continue down this line of thinking and with these people. So absolutely, I think sometimes it's better to be alone than it is to be with the wrong people.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that one. That is a fact.
But it can be difficult sometimes, finding those people, because you're like, am I the only one that thinks like this and acts like this and does this? I can honestly tell you, folks, trust me, you're not. It is physically impossible for you to be that only person, because I used to feel like that, like I was the only person on the planet that thought like this. And then little by little, you start realizing, oh, wait, there's more people that think like this. So.
Absolutely. But it takes dropping that old habit to make room for the new and the new people. So you have to remove those people from your life to make room for the proper
Definitely.
ones.
Yeah. And I think, just to add to that, it's it takes a great deal of courage sometimes to be willing to let those things go. And that's why I always try to enforce, whether it's a teenager or an adult, have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. Because trust me, 6 years down the line when you're done with high school, or 3 years down the line when you're done with college, you aren't going to be around the same people. You're always in transition. Your people are going to transition as well. And that's the way it's really meant to be.
Yes, that's powerful. But yes, absolutely. But especially for children, it's hard to wrap their brain around it, because a lot of times they're too busy listening to the noise and the peer pressure from those around them, that our children spend more of their time with other people than they do us as parents at home. And so that's why it's so important that when you're at home with your children, to spend that time teaching and grooming them and really listening to what their problem is, not trying to project your own problems onto them.
Definitely. Absolutely. And that is really important, because, kids are going through a number of scenarios, and enough scenarios by themselves, without, having to take on the baggage and expectations of parents. And you're absolutely right, Joe. I mean, people forget that their children spend more time, at school or at different groups nowadays. There are some parents that very rarely see their children because of all the activities that's going on. And I think gone, probably shouldn't be, but from society, it seems to be that gone are the days where you would sit down with them, and enjoy a meal together. And that was the time where you would get to know your children, you would talk, you would interact and socialize and everything. But that seems now to be a thing of the past, because we're all eating at different times. And that is, I think, one of the biggest issues for parents in terms of knowing what's going on with their children and finding that way to communicate.
Absolutely right. And very rarely can my daughter and I sit down and eat together, with how busy our lives are. But I tell you, the most important time for us is bedtime. It doesn't matter how old she is. I'm still going to sit there and read to her, talk to her. Doesn't matter how late, we're going to spend at least 30 minutes on it. But 2, get your child involved in what you have going on, so they feel like that their opinion and word matters, And then that helps them when they're dealing with their friends, their teachers, and all of that, because teachers aren't always correct.
Yeah.
Friends are not always correct, and they need to realize their opinion is important no matter how old you are.
I think that's really important, and that's great that you and your daughter, you've set aside that time, so that, okay, we're really, really busy during meal times and things, but you're still like, I'm going to read to it. We're going to have that time together. Kudos to you, because that's a really big thing, because a lot of people just say, guys, plunk yourself in front of the internet, plunk yourself in front of the TV, and that's where your education will come from. But absolutely, I think it's really powerful when you can get involved with what your child is getting on with, but equally when they can get involved with what you are doing as well. And I've known in my own life, certain family members just expect you to be interested in what they do, and it works both ways. That you've got to be willing to to spend that time with your child as well. So really, really powerful stuff there. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm, mm. I love it. I love it. Heck, this is helping me today.
These conversations always help, which is really, really great fun. You've got the first-hand experience, of having a daughter. I worked with teenagers for close to 20 years. So between us, as I was saying last night, between us, we should be able to put together something that's really helpful for folks.
Right, right. And you have to approach your child on what level they're on. That is so important.
Yeah.
And so, for example, my daughter, Maddie, is a little bit further along than most. So her mindset's different. So I don't sit there and talk to her like she's a child. I talk to her like she is an adult. And that is so important, because then she expects others to do that as well. And she sets that expectation for herself and everyone around her.
I think and that is a really great point, because that was one of the things I've never been comfortable with, and I know there are some people that are great with this, the baby cooing noises and everything, and talking down to children. The crazy thing is, I was always able to talk to children about a subject. It didn't matter what age they were, whether they were 6 or whether they were 16 or 26. And it was always in the same way. And I never really figured out, I never, stopped and thought, oh, why does this work? But I would always use humor with it as well, whatever it was that we're talking. And it's knowing, as you rightly said, Joe, that sometimes you can go much further with someone who's much further along than you can with someone that's just on the fringes. And I think it's important, that they are little people, that they are little human beings that have the amazing ability to understand and to grasp. And I think oftentimes they have that ability a lot more than what the older generation gives them credit for, which I always found really interesting.
Right. And we have to stop ourselves and think, where was I at that age?
Yeah.
And how was my parents talking to me? And what did I think about how they were talking to me? But if we take that step back, we can always realize that was not how I would have preferred it. And then we need to switch it to how we would have necessarily preferred.
I completely agree. And there are other times, folks, where, parents and adults want to tell you too much. And, again, you do that and you're going to end up with your child in therapy. You sometimes need to really rein it in. So you got to figure out what they're comfortable with and not just do it because it feels right to you, or makes sense to you. Because sometimes it can be a little bit too much to take on board.
Right. Yeah, 100%. We don't want to traumatize our children. We want to uplift them and encourage them and guide them in the right way. And as parents, I feel like everybody has it built into them. They know what that level is if you just really pay attention. And that's the key, is paying attention to your children.
Definitely.
Putting the phone down or whatever, turning the TV off, and just having a conversation and figuring out where your child's at.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is so fundamentally key. Is there anything else that you want to add before we move on in this segment?
I think I'm okay on this one. Now, you know me, something might pop up in just a little bit. So
And that's a really cool thing because this is completely unscripted. So, what you're getting is Joe and my, honest feelings and honest reactions about, our own experiences and things, which hopefully will help you guys as well. So it's really, really good. Joe, what have you got next on your list?
The thing that's really sticking out to me is the peer pressure. And
Yes.
that is such a huge issue, a huge issue. And a lot of it is you have to instill in your child to set the standards and expectations, to know what is right and what's wrong, and to not let anybody sway, no matter how that person might feel about them afterwards. So then they have to be confident in themselves. But I even had a sense of concern just yesterday with my daughter hanging out with a bunch of kids, and I'm just like, oh, remember, you do what you know is right, So you always have to be mindful and remind them as well. Just don't remind them too much.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't want to be a nagging parent.
No, because that breaks down the relationship and it breaks down, any forms of communication as well. Peer pressure is one of the things that it's always been around. And one of the areas that I've found teenagers, in fact, pretty much the majority of people in one form or another, is the peer pressure of judgments. So, for example, a person walks into the room and they may say, oh, well, isn't that person beautiful? Wow, she looks amazing. Equally, same scenario, same group of people, another person may walk into the room and my man, isn't she ugly? Isn't she fat? Isn't he ugly? Isn't he fat? I want to clear this up, for you guys, folks, because it's a really simple thing. What you're comparing is genetics and basically the structure of somebody else. You're comparing somebody's genes, as in your inner cells and your cellular structure. That's what you're saying when you're saying, oh, isn't that person ugly? Isn't that right? Okay. If you want to compare something, compare about how you are on the inside. Because guess what? The outside will fail. It will end up sagging. It will end up looking miserable, but if you're wanting to really, really, and I think this is starting, I hope at least, to happen more and more, and hopefully it is going to happen more and more, where people become aware of this, because I know there's a big movement for uplifting people now. It is going to take time because the world has been conditioned to a very negative way of thinking. But that's basically, when you say he's ugly, she's ugly, that's what you're comparing yourself to. The cellular structure and the genetics. Folks, you can't do anything about that. You are who you are, and that's who you're meant to be. So that's something that I really want to make sure that I got into today's show, because I think it's so important when people are comparing themselves to other people.
Yes. And Lord knows we've all tried to change our genetics at some point, but we've all pretty much failed at one point or in another. But you have to remember too that whatever someone says, they're ugly, they're pretty, that's just their opinion.
Yeah.
And everybody has an opinion, and everybody has a different view on what's pretty and what's ugly. But two, again, just like you said, you have to look on the inside, because a person might be ugly on the outside, but just have the most beautiful spirit and character, and then that's going to bring out the beauty in them every single time, and that's so important.
The crazy thing is, that a lot of people that are making those claims and saying, well, he's ugly, she's ugly, that's not a situation doesn't reveal, or a situation doesn't, present a person, it reveals them. And the person that's turning around and saying those kind of things is expressing how disastrously ugly they are on the inside. And it's a reflection on them. So be very, very aware as to, what people are saying, how they're saying it, and be very aware, I suppose, to get back on point, of the amount of peer pressure to do that, and to be strong enough in your own character to say, actually, no, that's not the behavior that I want to have. But again, that comes back to you. It all comes back to you, and being okay to say, you know what, I'm not accepting this at all.
And it's hard because kids are mean.
Yeah.
Adults are mean. it seems like the thought of kindness has gone away. And if you don't quite share another person's view or likes, they can be very hurtful.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to teach your child nobody else's opinion matters. Sometimes not even mom's, because I could be wrong. My daughter quite frequently shows me how I was incorrect, and I don't get mad at that. I encourage that because she's standing up for what she knows. And as long as everything's handled in the proper way, it's not a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
But you have to teach them to handle everything in the proper way.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, folks, you know, we're not saying here, you know, you follow all this blueprint and everything's going to be rosy, because it isn't. There's going to be times when, you know, you think, you know, you go down the path that you know that you don't want to go down. You get caught up in the emotion, you get in, you know, and it happens, you know, but it's being aware of it when it happens. It's not beating yourself up. It's saying, okay, you know, that was a moment in time, that was a decision I made. Move on. And it literally is that simple, you know. But again, don't allow yourself to be conditioned and believe, well, I made a bad decision, so therefore my entire life is ruined. You know, it's only happening that if you continue to make those bad decisions. But it's really important, as Joe was saying, to have enough strength in your own character, and it takes time. It does, and it comes with maturity. Don't expect to get it all like that. If you do, great. But it does take time for sure to build upon that for your own life.
It literally starts at the beginning of each day, reminding your child of that. But two, this is so important. How the first 5 minutes that you and your child start your day is going to determine how their day goes. So when you wake up your child, don't go in there, flip on the light, yell at them, get out of bed, go tickle them, love on them, sing them a song, make them laugh. And that truly helps. And that actually boosts their spirit for that day. And so when they get attacked, because they're going to attacked emotionally, sometimes physically, hope not, but it does happen, they are able and in a better mindset to approach it how it needs to be handled. But it takes constantly reminding them of how they should, at least once a day, starting from the get-go. Like I said, I've never talked to Maddie like she was a child. And even if she didn't understand what I was saying, she was still hearing it.
Yeah.
And so when she did understand, she was like, oh, I understand now. But she had still heard it so many times, it's okay.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, it's so important, you know, and also how you project onto your children is a really big thing. You know, there was a story that I was researching for one of my psychology essays, and you know, it was of two children's first day at school. And one of them, you know, children goes in kicking and screaming, shouting and bawling, really frantic, really anxious, everything there. The other one goes in and he can't wait to go to school. And basically the person who was writing this book had said, well, what was the difference between the two? So he actually spoke to the two fathers. And apparently one of the one that was kicking, screaming, shouting, bawling had told his child, you know, that's what happened on my first day of school. You know, you're going to get your head flushed down the toilet. You're going to get this, you're going to get that. And that's what was projected onto the child. So naturally, the child's going to be terrified. The other child that was, you know, really calm and relaxed and everything was just like, he'd been told, you know, school was one of the best places that I ever went. I met people like me. I had tremendous amount of fun. I played games, you know, and it makes such a big difference. You know, I think parents sometimes forget, and even grandparents and the immediate family forget how much they actually condition and project upon their children, you know, in every single day life. And I mean, let's face it, you know, it can be difficult because there are a lot of pressures, obviously, on parents. And oftentimes they're just trying to get them, you know, from A to B and you know, not lose their mind with them sometimes. But again, that's more a reflection on what's going on in your life. You build your life each and every single day. So you got to be careful, obviously, as to what you build into it. But I found that a really interesting study you know, just the differences of how that mindset and what you project upon your children, as Joe was saying, you know, really makes a difference, not just on day one, but also what they're like when they go to school, college, university, work. It changes their entire attitude. One thing.
Yes, 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 yes. That is so powerful. And like you said, sometimes we're just trying to get them here, there, because maybe we're running late or whatever, but we have to stop and say, this is our main responsibility as a parent, is to make sure that we raise our child properly. I don't care if we're running late, so on and so forth. We accepted this responsibility when this child arrived into this world, and that is the number one priority.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to remind yourself as parents, because you do get caught up in everyday life. But you just have to take a step back. Always take a step back and analyze your priorities as a parent.
I think that's really important as well. And, you know, absolutely. Sometimes it does just take that self-reflection to say, what's actually going on in my life? You know, if we haven't got time to sit down together or spend some time together somewhere, then that needs to be addressed, you know, really does.
Yes, 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 yes. I love it. I feel like people are learning something today, or just saying, "Hey, I can relate to that." So I'm excited.
I
I
really
know
hope so.
we have. Oh, I know so. I tell y'all, I learn from John every day, and so I'm so thankful to be able to do this with you. I think we have one more topic. What is it? Do you
We
remember?
do. It actually follows on really well from what we've been talking about, and it's how our lives are created. Here's the crazy thing. Our lives are actually created by our thoughts. Now, people look at you like, how the heck does a thought create my life? Well, get this. Every decision that you've ever made, every choice that you've ever thought or haven't thought, you know, chosen to do or chosen to go away from, has actually brought you to the exact place where you are right now. So the way that it works, it takes 0.009 of a millisecond to go from thinking something to actually doing it. Literally faster than I can do that. And it's amazing because you think it, you then feel, you get emotional about it, you have an intention to do something about it, and then you act upon it. And there is nothing in our world that hasn't, or that has been seen, done, built, heard, said, whatever, that didn't start from a thought. So what I would suggest, you know, and I work with people to, you know, teaching this exact same thing, is be very careful on how you use your thoughts, but more importantly, on how your children are using their thoughts and what kind of things that they're doing, because it is possible, as I said earlier on, to predict the future. If someone, for example, and we had a guest on several months ago on a previous show that I was doing, who's now a grandfather, was talking about the plug sockets, and their grandchildren were playing around the plug sockets, and he was saying, you know, don't play around with that plug socket because you're going to get electrocuted. Well, you know, they got a spark from the plug socket. You can predict the future. It was a bizarre story. It's up on YouTube. Yeah, knowing the person well, I know exactly that it's true. But it's true, you know, again, it's like playing with the hot iron. Don't play with a hot iron, you know, because you can predict if they play with the hot iron, they're going to burn themselves. So using your thoughts is really important. And obviously when that you can monitor that as a parent by what a parent or by what a child is saying, what they're watching, what they're doing. Those are some really good indicators as to where their head is at right now. Joe, what do you think?
Oh my goodness, yes. I'm just sitting here like, oh, constantly, all the time, I correct my daughter the way she approaches different subjects and just the words that are coming out of her mouth. So I can't is not allowed in my house.
Yeah.
The word no in certain aspects is not allowed in my house. Now, but you, of course, to that note, you want to teach them to say no when it's proper.
Yeah. Yes.
So let me add that in. But
This
just to
isn't
say,
yes, man. We want to make that very clear.
yes. But the way that your child views themselves is going to come out in their words.
Yeah.
And then whether it's true or not, it's eventually going to, I've noticed with my daughter, 10 years now of correcting. Now, if she hears me say something, she corrects myself, and then she corrects her friends, and so on and so forth. And so making sure that your child is thinking and speaking properly, not correct grammar, but is so important.
Yeah.
So important to their confidence, their future, and just their entire future, honestly.
Absolutely, because that was something that we teach on a lot, you know, and it is really important. It's a fundamental teaching that, again, doesn't get taught, is be very, very much aware, and this is not just for teenagers, but for parents, for everybody that's watching this, be very much aware on how you speak about yourself. You know, as Joe was saying, fundamental thing, a lot of negative talk, you're affirming what you believe about yourself. So we've had it before where teenage girls, teenage guys had been on the course with us, and they'd said, you know, well, they believe that they're ugly, and they believe that they're this, and they believe that they're that, because they are comparing themselves either in school or obviously to their favorite celebrity or whoever it might be. And when you say those things, again, the more you say them, the more you're going to start believing them about yourself. So be very, very careful and aware on how you talk about yourself, because it will have a massive impact on your confidence. There was a thing that we did in season 1, and I did this actually with both show hosts. It's a tremendous activity to do. If you want to build somebody up, it takes, you know, maybe 10 or 15 seconds. If you want to rip somebody down, it takes only, you know, literally 5 seconds. And all you need to do is sit there talking and be saying to them, you know, well, you're fat, you're ugly, you're miserable, you know, no one likes you, everything that's negative there. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, we had a show host nearly cry. We had a show host that nearly cried because doing this experiment, which they wanted to do, by the way. But then, you know, when you do it the opposite way of saying, you know, you're amazing, you're beautiful, you're powerful, you're strong, you know, you're all of these things, it can change a person's mindset and belief like that, all by the way that you talk about yourself, and all by the way, really, then you affirm yourself and you believe about yourself. So your words are really important, and it does condition your life in a humongous way.
So true. And you've done that with me.
I do that with everyone, to be fair.
It's fabulous. Now, let me clarify, he did not break me down. I was very upset. And
You're already there.
I was already there. There was no need to break down. And so he just literally 15 seconds, my entire mindset and attitude changed. And now I can use it on my daughter or whoever that I want to lift up. Don't do it to break people down. No.
But it's a really powerful thing to show when, you know, because a lot of the time we allow our external world to really impact us, you know, internally. And and it's harder, obviously, for younger kids, but I'm choosing my words carefully. It's important, I think, to instill in them to have that inner kind of core that's protected, that you can observe a situation, but you're not necessarily going to be, you know, impacted by it all the time. Some things are very, very difficult not to get upset about. You know, as we were saying, you know, when someone's been mean and horrible to you, or the loss of a loved one, or whatever that might be, you know, but it's how far you let that impact you, that's what you need to be aware of. But yeah, absolutely. You know, when you have those people that are tearing you down, and this is what Joe and I were talking about in the last segment, you know, that is going to have a negative, you know, impact on you. But imagine if they did the opposite way, when they were like, no, she's beautiful, she's strong, look at all the things that you're amazing at, look at all that you can actually do. You know, it was one of the things that I learned about myself, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's simple, you know, and we make it sound really simple, but actually it's the society that complicates things more than anything else.
Absolutely. And something as well that you and I talk about often, when you are talking about yourself, always make sure that it is followed with a positive.
Yeah.
Always, always, always. And so now each day I have my daughter to do that. I am beautiful. I am creative, so on and so forth. And she'll do it for, you know, about a minute, 2 minutes. but then it completely changes her way of thinking, and her confidence just grows instantly.
See, the whole thing is, and this goes back all the way through time. When you say the words "I am," it is a more of a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual phrase. And again, we're not going to get freaky deaky do on you guys. You don't need to worry about that. You can tell we're very, very laid back in the way we talk. But it is a more spiritual thing, and you are affirming that core inside you, whatever you believe about yourself. So when you say "I am not," or "I have not," that's actually what you are believing about yourself. And that's what you attract into your life. Like Joe was saying there with her daughter, when you say "I am beautiful, I am strong, I am a genius," which is one that Joe and I we've talked about a lot, and I mean that in every sense of the word, because if you want to be somebody who is really mentally gifted, and you want to write great novels, or you want to do self-help, or you want to fill in the blank, words like "you're not smart, you're not intelligent," they're going to bring you down, and it will really limit you a lot. So only be very, very careful about this. And you probably think, guys, okay, these guys are flying off a different planet. But it is very, very true. And you can observe it in your own life when you say, these things. Make sure you follow it up with a positive. It is really, really vital. And I believe Joe may have froze. There we go. Joe's back. There we go.
Two different parts of the world, people.
Well, we've got a storm that's blowing over here as well, so that's why our signal's out a little bit.
Yes, it's snowing here again.
Oh, is it? Wow.
Yes. But to piggyback off of what you said, and I'm pretty sure I heard it properly. Again, we're not crazy. But when I want to add, the way you respond to people when they say those about you is very important. Now, often I will tell John, "That's a genius idea. You're a genius." He didn't go, "Oh no." He goes, "I know." And so now I'm just like, yeah, I'm a genius too, just so you know.
Well, that's so people have been conditioned that when someone pays them a compliment, they're meant to negate it, and they're meant to say, hang on, I think we froze. There we go, we're back. But they're meant to say, and they're meant to negate it and say, "Oh, well, I'm not this, I'm not that." But actually, it's like, no, wait, yes, I am. And it's not done out of arrogance. It's not done out of anything else, but it's done because I know in myself who I am and what I'm looking at doing, and who I'm being. So never feel that by putting yourself down or saying, "Well, no, it's not really that good, it's not really this," that you're actually benefiting anyone, because all you're doing is fitting in with that level of thinking. And personally, I grew tired of that level of thinking, and now with in-laws and with extended family, I encourage them on how to watch what they're saying about themselves as well, because it all snowballs. That's the thing. Every new discipline affects the other. So when you're talking about yourself really positively, it's gonna pan out in other areas of your life. Equally, when you're talking negatively about yourself, it is going to show up in other areas of your life. And that's, it all begins with us, and it all filters out somewhere.
Yes. And when you say stuff like that, like, it's okay, or whatever, you're putting limits on yourself and your ability. And then that's rolling over onto your child, and then they start putting limits on themselves. And really, you should just say, anything's possible, everything's possible, and instill that in your child, so they truly believe, I can do anything I want to, no matter how old I am.
Yeah. Now, you might have some people, Joe, actually, that watch this and they say, "Oh, well, that's just a nice phrase. Anything's possible." But what if I told you it actually was? This isn't on our segment list, by the way, folks, but this is important, because we create our lives with every single thought that we have. So the secret actually to becoming a great artist, a great author, a great actor, a mathematician, whatever you want to be, figure out what you want to do, and then work backwards to figure out the steps that you need to do in order to get there. And it literally is possible. How do I know this? Because thousands of people have done it before, so it must be possible somewhere. And if you can think it, then logically you could do it. If a house was thought and it's been built, then that came, that at one point in time seemed like the impossible. Then the Empire State Building seemed impossible. Then the Taj Mahal seemed impossible. All of these things, but then they were accomplished. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, it's not impossible. This actually is possible. It just takes sticking with it. That's another area of discipline. But that's a topic for another time, I'm sure.
I know, I'm like, we could go a whole hour on that.
Very easily, but all disciplines that you do and or don't do, they all will affect you in some way for sure. And it is important, because the only limitations that you have genuinely are the limitations you put upon yourself.
So true. So true. And I don't know about you, John, but I don't have no limits.
No.
And my munchkin don't either. And we just want to encourage everybody to remove those limits because they're not necessary at all.
Definitely. And I think a lot of the limits that come are a result, again, of what society says, what family says and everything. Again, conversation earlier on today, having the same thought. I was asked, why or how did I start writing a book? I said, literally, I woke up one day and I sat down, and within 11 days, I had an entire first draft done of a book, and it's literally making that decision and then taking action. Those are really, really important things. We're giving you guys a lot of action steps today, but and that's what we want to do, but it's important to take action once you've got that idea and to stick with it. Those are probably the three biggest things I can hope that people will take away from this today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, take action, but even to add to that, take proper action.
Yes.
Because there is completely incorrect action to take, and you don't want to go that route.
Definitely. You want something that's going to take you closer to your goal, not further away from it.
Amen.
Joe, before we wrap up the show today, I have had a blast today. Is there anything else that you want to add before we finish up for today's episode?
Sorry, I froze again.
Oh, there we go. Let's try that again. Is there
please.
anything that you want to add before we wrap up today's episode?
I think the only thing that I really want to say, first of all, is thank you. I've had a blast.
Pleasure.
And I always love getting to chat, and I've learned stuff today. So I know that everybody else has. But to everybody, this week, love your child, listen to them, and adapt to how the world is changing, because they're in this world. They're not 15 years ago, 20 years ago when we were. And so it's different on how you have to approach things. And if you're not certain about what we said about how words are powerful, I would love for you to go and test that theory this week and test it on something positive, of course, nothing negative. But don't just do it by yourself. Do it with your child so y'all can learn that experience together.
I think that's really, really important for sure. And, again, our entire world is always in transition. Nothing is ever going to stay the same, no matter how much we want it to. And it is important that you realize that. And like I said earlier on, have a mind that's open to everything and really closed off to nothing, because you never know, what is going to come your way, and equally what opportunities are going to come your way. So folks, that's going to do it from us today, from Joe and myself. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend, because it could be the very thing that they need to hear in their hour of darkness. If you're struggling right now and you don't know how to get from where you are to where you want to be, come and visit us at thebattlesweallface.com. We have got multiple options that are there, whether it be coaching, whether it be even courses that you can do with your son or daughter, loved ones, all of that kind of stuff, and even stuff you can do as a family. And we are always here to help. So until next week, we want to thank you for watching. And stay safe, stay feisty, and keep on going. And we'll catch you same time, same place next week. Take care.